Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I am pleased to get to stand in front of you guys. I was thinking about this morning, I sat up front, and I remember early on when I was running the Traumatology Institute at Florida State, people would call me up or email me and would ask, what's the best training that a person can take in preparation for doing treatment with somebody who is traumatized? And I've always said CPE. Yeah, I mean, you guys learn how to sit across from people instead of learning models. And you learn how to stay regulated and how to continue to access your frontal lobe. And God bless you for the work you do. Really grateful to be here. So, a couple of things I want to say before I get started. I've been doing this for 40 years. You know, she read all of my bona fides, all the stuff that I've done, and none of that was a lie. But the thing that qualifies me, I think, the most to stand up in front of a group of people and talk a little bit about trauma is that I've sat across from about 25,000 trauma survivors. And probably 2/3 of those have been in so much pain that they want to die. And that's a whole different kettle of fish than publishing research. And, you know, I've learned something from sitting across from all those trauma survivors in the years of doing that. And, you know, I've set out on a mission to make the resolution of traumatic stress simple. And I want to share with you the fruits of that labor today and have you walk out of here empowered to help people to transform their lives quickly and mostly effortlessly. So the other thing that I want to say to get started is I've been, since I started at the Traumatology Institute in 1997, I've kind of had this evolution of mission from where I still have a private practice. I still work with trauma survivors, but mostly these days, my practice is filled with care professionals, and I help people that help people who are traumatized, addicted, or suffering. That's you guys. And towards that end, I want you to know that any of the materials associated with this workshop, if you would like to have the PowerPoint from either of the presentations, you are welcome to email me and I will happily send you that material, and you are welcome to use it in any way that serves you academically, clinically, professionally, commercially. It's yours. The only thing I would ask you to do is that if you use my materials publicly, is that you would cite me in your use of them. Other than that, they're yours. Also, I offer everybody who ever takes a training or sits in a talk that I do, one free 30-minute consultation. And I've been doing that for 25 years. And so, you know, if you've got a case that's stumping you or you need some assistance with professional development issues, you want to know what training to take, if there's any way that I can serve you in your mission, you are welcome to reach out for me, and you will find that my feet match up with where my lips are flapping right now. I will be responsive to your request. So with this presentation this morning, what I want to do is to kind of move from the problem to the solution in an hour and 5 minutes, hour, 10 minutes. And help you to reframe what traumatic stress is, because you're really only working with one thing, and it is not the past. If you want to be a potent agent of transformation with people that have PTS, not all of your clients have PTSD, but every single one of them has PTS. Every single one of them. If the people you are working with are in distress, the reason they're in distress is because of what their autonomic nervous system is doing. And when you start working with the autonomic nervous system, when you start having the capacity to manage yours first, and then secondly, begin to interrupt the threat response in your client's autonomic nervous system, you know what happens after that? Health. Health happens as soon as you are able to help people to arrest their their threat response in their body. And that's exciting. That's quickly transformative. So I want to walk you through a little bit of, I'm sure that most of you have a pretty good grounding in ACEs, but I don't suspect that you've thought a whole lot about ALEs, which are adverse life experiences. And I want to talk about how ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, and ALEs, which are adverse life experiences, how do those events 20, 30, 40 years ago turn into symptoms today? How does that happen? And I want you to have a nice conceptual understanding of how and why that happens, and what is the main outcome of surviving painful experiences in the past. And then we'll transition into the solution about what has to happen vis-a-vis those symptoms for them to ameliorate, resolve, and for a person to begin to not just return to premorbid functioning, but what we want to do with every person that we work with is give them the engine to move into optimized lives. And so it's not just resolution of symptoms, that it's transformation and evolution. So, without ado, I'm going to jump into some of that content. I want to welcome any questions or any comments that come from today, but you're going to have to manage your nervous system to do that because there are microphones on this side and that side. And if you ask the question, since this is being recorded, I've been asked to ask you to step to the microphone to ask those questions. So you'll need to regulate your nervous system so you got your frontal lobe so you can remember the questions. Or you'll do what I'm going to do, which is no. So let me jump off here with starting with just unpacking some of these. Adverse life experiences. The big dog of adverse life experiences is actual or threatened death, actual or threatened serious injury, actual or threatened sexual violence. That's criterion A for PTSD in the DSM. And there's multiple ways that you can get that, experiencing it personally, watching it happen in vivo, or learning about it happening to a close friend or family member. That's PTSD proper. And somewhere, since the pandemic, somewhere between 10 and 14% of Americans have one of those encounters sometime during their lifespan. Not everybody has an encounter with a criterion A event. But everybody has witness trauma. Every single person. And you know how I know that? Watch this. How many of you in this room have ever been attacked in a parking garage? I don't see any hands. If you have been, you've been menaced or been accosted, then sit out of the answering of this question. How many of you, when you go in a parking garage, are on guard and wary? Why? Why? Yeah, you've seen so many films that you know when they show a tableau of a parking garage, somebody's about to get got, right? Like, you know that, and your nervous system has encoded that, and so just by watching TV, you are having a threat response when you walk into a parking garage. That happens all over the place, that we have thousands of daily experiences that get encoded by our nervous system as little t, what Francine Shapiro, any of y'all trained in EMDR, little t traumas. I just went through the big T's, those actual or threatened death, actual or threatened serious injury, actual or threatened sexual violence. That's a big T trauma. But the little t traumas of our lives still do the same thing as the big T traumas. They're just cumulative. They're not one thing and then you're traumatized the next day. You know, it's natural disaster, motor vehicle accident. Like one day later, you're having all the symptoms of PTSD. But with witnessed secondary trauma, those of you who have done any studying on compassion fatigue, you know the accumulated effect of that, it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger over a lifespan. And how many of you sitting in this morning's workshop, how many of you have never heard the term ACEs before? Cool. Cool, wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. Because those of you who have looked into ACEs, you have seen that what ACEs is doing is killing the medical model. It doesn't know it's dead yet. You know, Thomas Kuhn, the first philosopher of science, said that way paradigms change is the people benefiting from them have to die first. So this paradigm's in the process of changing from a pathogenic one, hopefully, to one that I'm going to champion a little bit today and talk a little bit about, to a salutogenic paradigm. How many of you have heard of salutogenesis? I'm really cool, really grateful to get to introduce to you a salutogenic approach. And I think it'll especially resonate with chaplains and faith leaders. So those are the ones that are stayed and that we have worked with. You know that the more adverse childhood experiences that a person has, the more they are at risk in the second half of their life for every single thing you can think of that's bad. From heart disease to smoking to alcoholism to self-injury to suicide, just everything you can think of bad. The higher your ACEs, the more you are at risk for having those things. But then there's this comes from PACES Coalition, a Canadian organization that stands for Positive and Adverse Childhood Experiences. And they have developed all of these other things that impact our risk factor after they've happened. And how many of you know somebody that is suffering from a chronic illness? What happened to them when they got diagnosed, when the onset of that illness happened? Their functioning most likely went down. They were challenged by that. They had to start to accommodate. They had to evolve and grow to be able to accommodate chronic illness, to be able to continue to have quality of life. That is an adverse life experience that significantly diminishes somebody's functioning. And then we have adverse adult experiences. And, you know, those are just everything from traffic to surgeries to any painful experience. Let me say this really clearly. Any painful experience of your life can and usually does produce sensitivity, which means the activation of your threat response in future contexts that you encounter something that is sensory similar to what was happening during the painful learning experience. How many of y'all went to junior high school? You're all trauma survivors. For sure. I mean, all of us ran into the mean girls, right? We laugh about it right now, but for how many of you was that just freaking brutal? Like every day, I was afraid to go to school. I was obese. It was awful. It was daily nervous system that was constantly cranked up and jacked up. I didn't know anything else to do, but boy, all of that was encoded. And it makes me, you know what the outcome of that is? I'm standing up here in front of you guys afraid of you. That's what happens. I'm afraid of people because of my ACEs and because of those experiences early on with being ridiculed and bullied. I am afraid of other people. My nervous system activates. Now, I've learned something about being able to regulate it so I can stand up here in front of you still being afraid and do that in a body that is simultaneously comfortable with a frontal lobe that is functioning. But I've also, when I started public speaking, I didn't know how to regulate very well, and I have multiple experiences of standing up in front of audiences going, that I could not. I got so scared that I lost the content in my brain. I could not put together the presentation that I had slaved on for weeks to stand in front of an audience, and that it wouldn't come. So adverse childhood relational experiences, being bullied, being judged, and then all the ones that didn't make the 10 big ones for the ACE study. These include spanking, covert incest, being bullied, growing up in poverty, all of those. So all of us meet some of that, right? Like every one of us have some of those things in our history. And then, any of y'all familiar with Bruce Perry? Anybody know anything about him? He's Baylor, a psychiatrist, child psychiatrist. Spectacular human being, man. If you ever see him speak or you're around him, I had lunch with him a few years ago. I just wanted to like hug him and take him home, you know. He is the most ventral vagal human being I've ever met in my life. And his research has demonstrated that any disruption of attachment experience in the first 6 months of life produces lifelong autonomic nervous system dysregulation. Any disruption of attachment. That means, like, you know, parents being in the other room for a little while and the child not having a caregiver that they can see. Just that is enough for the person to have the nervous system get dysregulated. So all of those babyhood experiences have a very potent impact on the health of the autonomic nervous system as we grow up. And, you know, how many times was your great-grandmother raped? You don't know, do you? But if that did happen, if any of those traumas did happen in her lives or the lives of your ancestors, that gets transmitted both through genetics, a little bit through genetics, but mostly through the parent-child relationship in early life, that begins to manifest in the relational style that gets transferred generation to generation to generation. You want to hear something magical about that? As a parent, if you present yourself in the context of your child, and that child can be an adult child, in a body whose muscles are relaxed, you have stopped the transmission of intergenerational trauma. That's all it takes, is being in a body that is relaxed and attuned to your child. It is that simple. That's what produces secure attachment. Relaxed body, attunement. That's it. Man, that is elegantly simple. But any of you are parents, you know it ain't easy. It is a lifelong piece of work to be able to do that. And then finally, how many of you all have adverse institutional experiences? Anybody ever been to the DMV? I mean, what are the bodies doing in the DMV? What are the nervous systems of the people that are in the DMV? What's going on with those nervous systems when you're sitting there waiting on your number to be called? They're jacked up, aren't you? That's a clinical term, by the way. They got a jacked up nervous system. And you know what? How many of you have heard that workplaces are a toxic environment? And your workplace is likely a toxic environment. You know what makes workplaces toxic more than anything else? Is the nervous system of your coworkers. Because we are biologically encoded to read threat response in other people. And if you are jacked up, then my nervous system activates. And if I can't regulate myself while I am around you while you're jacked up, then I am suffering. I am generating symptoms all the way through that day. So as we learn to self-regulate, we can be in toxic environments and begin to be immune to those toxic environments. And man, that is my life's work right there. It's helping people to be able to work and thrive in toxic environments and not have to suffer as a result of that. Anybody interested in getting some of that? Well, come back this afternoon because I'm going to teach you that skill. Word. Since most of you have heard about ACEs, I included that in the handout. How many of you know what your ACEs is? I believe that it is absolute requirement for you to sit across from a trauma survivor to A, know what your ACEs score is and what that means for you. And for those of you who know what ACEs is, my ACE score is a 9. People with ACE scores of 9 do not end up in stages in front of roomfuls of professionals. You know, we end up with spike in our arm, we end up dead, we end up in prison. And I'm really grateful that I had people in my life in my early adulthood that loved me, and I began to have secure attachment in my early adulthood, and it changed everything. So, to not get caught up in this, some of the ACEs statistics, most of you have probably seen this. I think there's a couple of these that are worth mentioning. That, when we hear about, a particular food is 30% more likely to cause colon cancer, we stop eating that food. What do you do when something's 1,500% more likely to have suicide? Seems like that we ought to do something about that. And that's pretty important, I think, data for looking at how to tailor prevention programs, is looking at what the ACE scores are, of being able to work with people that have high ACE scores. This one over here has always intrigued me. It's just a crazy, in behavioral statistics, you don't get numbers like this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime statistic. Men with ACEs of 6 or more are 46 times, 4,600% more likely to use IV drugs than somebody with ACE score 0. That's wackadoo to me. And this one, how many of you have seen this one before or know about this one? Is that profound? People with 6 of those ACEs, and to just do those quickly, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, physical, emotional neglect, alcoholism, drug abuse in the home, mental illness in the home, separation or divorce of parents, domestic violence, or incarceration. One of those 10 things. If you have 6 or more, there is high risk for everything to negatively affect you and to cut significant years off of your life. Oh, I didn't. Sorry. I am so flawed that I just always wonder what the heck's God's doing with me up here. I was like, couldn't you pick somebody that was a little bit more competent to have been the steward of this stuff? But no, it's me. So I want to do this just for a second. This is how the impact, and I think it's important that you kind of recognize this, that there is, that bottom rung there is the intergenerational transmission of the things that have happened back there that we are saddled with in our developmental experiences because of the relationship with our parents and because of our genetics and epigenetics. Then comes next the social conditions of which we're born into. I was born into the southern coal fields of West Virginia, where domestic violence happened in every home in my neighborhood. It was just like, it was cultural. And then comes the adverse, so we're stacking up on top. Then comes those adverse experiences that I just mentioned. And what happens to children that have those? What happens in children's bodies that have those experiences? They have disrupted neurodevelopment. Their nervous system is not developing for optimization and functioning in their lives. Their nervous system is built to what? It is built for self-defense. And they spend the rest of their lives in instinctual patterns of self-defense instead of intentional behavior. That's the outcome of that. And that produces the cognitive, social, and emotional impairment. They are stunted. They don't get to flourish as children because they are constantly perceiving threat everywhere they look, and their little nervous systems are constantly compelling them into patterns to protect themselves. Constantly. And somebody that's in a nervous system that they're feeling jacked up all the time? What do you suppose happens when somebody in junior high school or high school says, hey, try this? What's going to happen then? A freaking explosion of dopamine. And for the first time in that person's life, they feel well-being. Once somebody that has that history that I've just talked about, once they have their first drink or once they have their first hit, there is no saying no to that anymore. It is a way out. That addiction is medicine for living in a nervous system like that. It is the ability to survive my environment. I just celebrated 29 years clean last week. It's a miracle. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I wrote a song about the first time I got high. It was everything, it was everything. I could not stop the pursuit for the next 18 years and going to jail several times and all of the things that came with that lifestyle. Because what happened now I got two things. Now I got the nervous system that is constantly energizing me to a point that is distress. And I got the need to soothe and comfort that. And those two things braid together, and you can start seeing what's going to be happening in early adulthood on to later adulthood, is that I got a nervous system and what I'm doing with the environment. For some folks, that addiction looks like food. For some folks, that addiction looks like gambling, or it looks like spending, or it looks like something else. One of the things that I've discovered in sitting across from trauma survivors is people that have PTSD, they all have some form of addiction. There is compulsivity and impulsivity around using some type of external agent to try to manage their inside world. It is compulsive, and they are not able to stop it by an act of will. So here's how this works. I want you to take a snapshot of this because this is important. Oh, wait. The reason that I did that stuff, that's a lot of stuff, right? Like all of that I popped out here at you. All of these things, of which, you guys in the room have some of those. The reason why, as an agent of change and an agent of healing, that's so important to me. People say, doesn't that overwhelm clients? And I say, when you look at that stuff through a pathogenic lens, yes, it overwhelms clients. But what happens when you look at that through a salutogenic lens? Suddenly, you are sitting across from one of the most resilient people on the planet. Can you get that? I mean, look at what this person survived. And I hold the aces up to them and I say, and everybody I work with has an ACE score higher than 4. I go, how did you survive this? How'd you get from there to here? What'd you do? And somebody says, well, I crawled in a bottle and I stayed there for 30 years. And I go, it worked, didn't it? You made it. You survived everything that life has thrown at you. Yes, it was messy, but you made it through every single thing. The hard part of your life's over. You've already gone through that. And I promise you, with that resume, you're going to survive me in therapy. And you see what? It just flipped everything up on its head. Nobody's ever talked to them like that. Nobody's ever kind of called them resilient and called them heroes. I say, I'm not going to give you a diagnosis. I think you should get an award for having survived your life. And that sets you on the right foot of being able to sit across from trauma survivors, is to help them on the road to arriving at self-compassion instead of shame. Because they believe something's terribly wrong with them by the time they come see us. And we want to teach them that the only problem you have is you got a nervous system that's over-adapted. You got a nervous system that is perfectly adapted to care providers that hurt you. But you've already survived that. That nervous system is still functioning here today, pumping out all that self-defense where it is not necessary anymore. So all we got to do is help you to adjust that nervous system downward to the level of real danger you are encountering. So, how does this turn into symptoms? Anytime we're going through any of those events that those 100 events that I've put up there over the past 15 minutes, what happens is the amygdala in your brain, Joseph Adu calls the amygdala the hub and the wheel of fear. It is the thing that starts the threat response. The amygdala sends a message down the vagus nerve, and your body produces energy. And what happens in some of those experiences, in all of them, it happens, but in some of them it happens at such a threshold that it shuts down frontal lobe functioning. So normal narrative memories shut down during those experiences because of how much energy is in your body. And what happens, what causes traumatic stress, is the encoding of the sensory experiences during that event, during getting bullied, during somebody pulling a gun on you, during getting hit by your caregivers. And that, the energy in your body gets paired with whatever you saw, whatever you heard, whatever you smelled, whatever you tasted, whatever sensory experiences that were encoded in that moment, they got encoded with terror. So that becomes an associational learning experience. All trauma is associational learning. It is the pairing of the sensory fragments of that experience with terror. So that what happens in the future, when you are in any situation that is in any way sensory similar to any of those painful experiences you had in the past, what happens here in the present is your amygdala fires. And if you want to know what traumatic stress is, cooked down to its one thing, is people that have traumatic stress perceive threat where there is little or no danger. Can you hear that? They perceive threat where there is little or no danger. And that is what is generating all the distress that they have while they're sitting across from you, is the perception of threat where there is little or no danger. Here it is in a kind of graphic. We got a woman who is a dog lover. And one day she gets attacked by a German Shepherd. After she gets attacked by that German Shepherd, do you get it? She's not just afraid of German Shepherds. What is the outcome of that attack? That aperture opens up, and she now perceives threat with every single dog that she encounters, maybe all four-legged animals. She has now entered a much more dangerous world after that attack. So during the original experience, and then during the experiences here in the present, it's the same thing. Because the amygdala is firing, they have the same experience, albeit less intense, but it's still happening here in the present, is that the energy in the body goes up. When we perceive threat, we have an involuntary raise of energy. And if we stay in the context of that perceived threat, then the energy keeps going up, 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 up. And look at what's happening over in that other column. We have all of our executive functioning going down, 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 down. That is what is going on with traumatic stress. How many times does that happen for you each day? How many times do you find yourself perceiving threat where there is no danger? I can tell you for me, I perceive threat every single moment of waking consciousness. That's for me. You have to do your own personal research on that. But for me, my body is constantly activated. I never check in on my body and find the muscles completely relaxed, ever, ever, ever. And you know the only reason why muscles are involuntarily constricted in your body? It's because you're perceiving a threat. Unless you got lockjaw or some other weird disease. That's what causes the involuntary constriction of muscles, is the perception of threat, period. Increased energy, decreased functioning. I think that's about as close to hell as you can get and not die. And that's what is happening for most of the people that we see. You can see all the negative effects of that go on when that's happening, is that you lose the ability, the longer you stay in the context of the perceived threat, you lose the brain functioning to be able to control that energy. So you find yourselves, how many of you have watched yourself act in ways that pain blooms out on the faces of people you love? Any of y'all ever had that experience of saying something or acting in a way that causes somebody you love to recoil? That is you jacked up with minimal neocortical functioning. You didn't intend to do that. It was compulsive. It was against your will. But it was because you were perceiving a threat at a level that you could not control what was happening in your body anymore. Is that valuable to know that? Why? What just happened with that knowledge? You just got the keys to help your clients heal their moral wounds. Can you hear that? Because those moral wounds come from consistently acting in ways that are violations of their integrity. They go out the door that day and say, I am not going to be a jerk to my spouse. I am going to be loving and kind to my kids. And then the first time the room's messed up, they come out the side of their neck involuntarily and watch that pain bloom out on the face. That is not a moral problem. It's a physics problem. There's too much energy in the body. And as we help people to lower the amount of energy in their bodies, then one of the outcomes of that is they start to be able to execute intention rather than continuing to execute patterns of self-defense. That's exciting for me. And that's real different than just resolving the symptoms. Okie dokie, moving forward. Any questions or any comments about anything I've covered? You got to step to the microphone, so I don't think any of you are going to do it, but you may. And I welcome you. So meet Aaron Antonovsky. He is the father of salutogenesis. And salutogenesis is contrasted with pathogenesis. Pathogenesis is the lens that we've looked through for the past 200 years. The last conference of salutogenesis in Germany, in Europe, it was a European conference, had over 2,000 health professionals at that conference. You probably get 10 in the United States. If that, I'd go. But here's salutogenesis at its simplest form. Salutogenesis is working with a person, especially as triage, especially as early treatment, to help catalyze health in their lives as quickly and as powerfully as we can, is to find ways to help them to move into health. And what I've found is as I am able to help folks to move into health, guess what happens with their symptoms? Is they almost always dissipate. There's always going to be a place for pathogenesis. There's always going to be the need for surgery and the need for medication and those things. But I think with a much smaller swath of people than we're using those things for right now today. And I just believe that everybody needs to have the capacity to regulate their nervous systems. And you know what Antonovsky talked about that health was, is he calls it a sense of coherence. It's pretty cool. And the sense of coherence is really three basic things. It is one, that your life has some degree of predictability to it, that you can kind of know and expect what's happening. Two is that you have the resources and competency to effectively handle those things that are coming up for your life. And three, you are able to make meaning and richness from the events of your life. And the more of that you have, the less illness you have. That's the sum total of his research. It's pretty fascinating. I invite you to dig into it a little bit. And Joseph Volpe was one of the first hallucinogenic people on the planet. In the 1950s, he found out that you cannot have stress and relaxation in the same body at the same time. Let me say that again. You cannot have stress and relaxation in the same body at the same time. And he did his very first research experiment. He came from Johannesburg, South Africa, and spent 2 years at Stanford University. And he worked with folks that had compulsivity and impulsivity with anger. And he spent a year of teaching them to get, easy part, harder part, to keep the muscles in their body relaxed. What do you suppose happened with anger when he got those folks in relaxed bodies? Those people that were getting arrested and getting in trouble for the impulsivity around their anger. When he got them in relaxed bodies, what happened to the anger? It went freaking poof. Poof. Angry, not angry. It didn't dissipate, it went away. It was gone. And he thought that was pretty fantastic. He wrote a book about it and several articles about it. And I don't think very many people paid much attention to him. And I think he got demoralized. That's conjecture on my part. And he moved back to Africa for a year. But he ended up immigrating to the United States and was at Temple University for the rest of his life until he died in 1997. And he was able to demonstrate that with anxiety disorders and all kinds of that process that he discovered was called reciprocal inhibition. That when you confront something that scares you with a relaxed body, you resolve its ability to scare you. And that's power. And every single effective trauma therapy that's out there uses reciprocal inhibition as its energy. Every single one of them, from prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, EMDR, somatic experience, all of those treatments that work with trauma, that they catalyze reciprocal inhibition. But the way we've done that for 150 years is with imaginal exposure. We've had people come in and tell us their stories. Hopefully we've done some relaxation skills building with them. And then they're able to tell us their story in a relaxed body, and that dissipates the energy, and hopefully one or two of those, it begins to resolve their symptoms. Oh, darn. Oh, it's down there. And this is the tried and true method that all of those evidence-based treatments that you hear about uses imaginal exposure. Any of y'all had the experience of working with somebody that has been diagnosed with complex PTSD? Those of you who have worked with complex PTSD, and if you've tried to do this with them, you've seen things get worse with them, haven't you? When you try to take them back into the memories, then what happens is they start hemorrhaging trauma, and it gets really messy. And so, I've been working with CPTSD for the past 15 years or so, and what happened is we had to figure out a different way rather than what we had been doing for all these years, which is to have them tell their stories. We had to figure out a different way to treat that. And I'm pleased to have been on the front end of some of that work. And let me demonstrate the other way for you right now. Let's say that when I was a child, that my caregivers had a fetish for black leather portfolios. And anytime I did something they didn't like, they whacked me in the head with it. And let's say I got whacked several hundred times throughout my development. And what's your name right there on the blue shirt? Lynn? Let's say that Lynn has been sitting there for the past, half an hour, however long we've been in here, and he feels something uncomfortable in his back, and he pulls out this black portfolio, and he kind of walks up here to me and says, Eric, is this yours? How am I going to respond to this black portfolio? In the vernacular of my people, I'm going to be scared of it, aren't I? Those are my people. Am I in any danger? Is there anything dangerous about this? Yes, no? Not a thing. But it makes all kinds of sense why I would perceive that as threatening, wouldn't it? And what do you suppose has been my involuntary, compulsive response if I'm walking down the street and I see a black portfolio in the middle of the street? What am I going to do with it? I'm going to try to get away from it. I'm going to avoid it. And if I've been avoiding this thing my whole life, do you see that it's never changed? I am continuing to live the rest of my life as a victim of these past experiences and black portfolios. But watch this. When I take this black portfolio from Lynn, have a sensory experience with it. Don't put it over the microphone. And I relax the muscles in my body completely. How much distress am I in right now? One more time? I don't know what else to call that except a miracle. That is a miracle. And if I am remembered posthumously, I have people that follow me around and take down all of my Ericisms. If I'm remembered posthumously for any quote, I hope it's this. Just because something is science doesn't mean that it's not a miracle. And this is a miracle. Every single one of our clients that have post-traumatic stress is 1 second away from being inside of a comfortable body. 1 second. But what we've been doing for the past 150 years is we've been trying to get folks to there through their brain. And that is not good treatment because the problem is not in the brain, it's in the body. And when we help folks to get in their body first and to be able to relax the muscles in their body, then they move into a state of comfort. And guess what happens with the brain? It reboots and they're back to optimal performance, optimal functioning of their neocortex. That's reciprocal inhibition. And what I do is I teach folks, I spend a session or two teaching them how to get into those bodies that are relaxed, and then I send them out into the world. Just like that woman that got attacked by the dog, what I would do is I would spend a day or a session or two helping her to be able to intentionally discover muscles in her body that were constricted and then voluntarily to release that constriction and get good enough that she could demonstrate doing that in my office. And then I would either send her or go with her to the Humane Society. And I would have her get her body relaxed and then pet that doggy there. And then take a break, get her body relaxed again, and then pet this doggy. And then relax body, and then this doggy, and then this doggy, and then finally a German Shepherd. And do you see what's happened? She has desensitized. She has intentionally confronted sensory triggers that activate that amygdala firing in her brain. And she has paired that with a relaxed body. And that lowers the threshold. Each time she does that, it is lessening and lessening the level of distress in her body. And the more that somebody lives in a body whose muscles are relaxed, what's happening with their level of stress? Say again? It's decreasing. The more time you spend in a body whose muscles are relaxed during each day, the less time you are generating symptoms. Does that make sense to everybody in the room? That's pretty elegantly simple, isn't it? Spend more time in a body whose muscles are relaxed and suffer less. And my hope is that most faith leaders would have us do that. I would think. I could be wrong about that. So, I want to spend the rest of the time that I have with you of doing a process, a truncated process that I do with every single person I ever do a training with, and that is to give them an owner's manual for their autonomic nervous system. And you don't have an owner's manual for your autonomic nervous system, and I know that because I've spent 10 years working with physicians, helping them not die from the practice of medicine. And with those physicians, 5,000 of them in a group practice in California, those physicians, after 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, and however many years in clinical practice, and they're mostly emergency physicians, they know everything there is to know about the autonomic nervous system. They know how to treat disorders of it, but they don't know how to live with one. And until you learn what is happening in your autonomic nervous system, subcortically, beneath your level of consciousness, you are conscripted to be a victim of your nervous system. And as this is truly a case of learning better equals doing better. So I want to spend 15 or 20 minutes of walking you through how to change all of this. And the way I do that with my clients is I ask them this question first, because it turns out that you can't just tell people, you can't just sit and start talking to them about their autonomic nervous system because you become Charlie Brown's teacher. Ask me how I know. I did that for several years. Wah, 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 wah. So I had to figure out a way to do this that was engaged, that was interactive, not just professorial. So I want to do that with you. And the way that I start that process with all of my clients, and the way I'm going to do it with you guys, is to ask this question. Is your life stressful? Well, wonderful. So, So I'm going to ask you guys to bark out for me. What are some of the negative effects of stress in your life? I heard eating. What was another one? Not the causes, the effects. Well, sleep problems. What was that one? Lose direction? Distraction. Just like that, huh? That's a good, isolation would be a good one, but I only got that many boxes. So what are some of the causes of stress in your life? Work. And this is where I put money too, right? Say again? Politics. One more. War? I got that. What was one more? War. Okay. Excellent. So I collect that from my client in my portfolio. I do that with 2 columns. And then I do this. I hold it up to them so they can see the data, and I say, these are not the cause of your stress. And as long as you believe that these are the cause, then check it out. You're going to keep having those. Matter of fact, the primary reason why you have these is because you mistakenly believe these to be the cause. How do you suppose my clients look at me after that? It's always a little bit of a sneer and a cocked head. Always. But I never do this at the very beginning, so hopefully I've earned a little bit of belief, sense of competence. And they're curious because in the same way that you are, embedded in that is I'm going to offer an alternative explanation of what the cause of stress is. And they're curious enough that they let me continue to go forward and maybe hang myself. So this next little gambit, how many of you in the room are perfectly and totally 100% safe? Look around the room. Got one hand. For those of you not raising your hand, would you please point to me the danger in this room? Me? I am absolutely capable of going off. But check this out. I can't reach you. I could say something. There's nothing I can say that endangers you, though. Perceive, yes. I didn't ask you what was perceivedly dangerous in this room. I asked how many of you are perfectly 100% safe, and then I said, if you're not safe, it's because there must be some danger in this room. And I'm not a danger to anybody right now. If I come off the stage and I get over there near Lynn, then possibly I'm a danger to him. But somebody point to me a danger in this room. So I'm in danger right now, huh? Could be. Right, I didn't ask you what could be dangerous. I asked you what is dangerous in this room. Those could be, and obviously they're not going to stay up there for forever. They're going to drop at some point, but right now, if you use your senses and check that out, you see that it's perfectly safe. I am perfectly safe right here in this moment standing under that. Correct? Right? Perfectly safe. If it starts shaking, then I'm going to let it fall on you guys. And I'm going to get out of the way. Yes, ma'am. Say again? Fire system? What's on fire? Viruses. Well, it turns out that you're not in danger from ingesting a virus. You're not in danger from being exposed to a virus. You're only in danger when your body can no longer stop the viral replication of that particular virus. And nobody in this room is sick enough that that's happening to right now. So you may have it in you, but right now in this moment, you are not in danger from that virus. You may be in 2 or 3 days from now, but right now you're not. Where's the danger in this room? Self. And I got one of those heads too. How are you dangerous to yourself right now? The way you perceive yourself. Like I got one of those heads too. But thoughts are not dangerous. If the voices in my head are telling me to stab myself in the throat with a pen, I'm not in any danger from those thoughts unless I take my pen out and start stabbing myself in the throat with it. Then I might be in danger. But what the content of my thoughts are not dangerous. They're scary, but they're not dangerous. Where's there a danger in this room? Your somatic body. Yeah, you're going to die.
Well, no, in the sense of perceiving danger, making it be danger, creating our whole autonomic system to stress out over something that may not be real.
Right. He said that our somatic system that responds to the perception of danger, then it could cause us to actually be in danger, whether those could be health concerns or the compulsive behavior that we might take to try to get out of it, I'm guessing. Right, but in this moment right here, right now, you're not at that level of where any of that would happen. This moment right here, right now, every one of you in this room is perfectly 100% safe. Whether you believe it or not, you still are. And herein lies the peace of God. Right here, where we are all perfectly 100% safe. And I want to say this as soulful as I can. Welcome home. You are all perfectly 100% safe in this room right now. Whether your brain believes it or not, it does not change the empirical truth of that. Do you get that? And what you experienced, you know, you guys are advanced degree professionals, and there was only one of you raised your hand. When I asked how many of you in this room are perfectly 100% safe, only one of you raised your hand. What do you think's happened to people that have ACE scores of 8, 9, or 10? What's going on with them? They're perceiving threat everywhere they are. You guys were perceiving threat in this room. You were hallucinating. That's not good psychiatric fitness. You were hallucinating the presence of dangers which do not exist in this room. And that is square one foundational for self-regulation, to interrupt that threat response. Watch how cool this is. Ask yourself this question in your head right now. Am I in any danger? For those of you that answer that question, no, what happens in your body? It relaxes, doesn't it? Isn't that lovely? None of you have ever thought about going out into your day and gone Easter egg hunting for moments of safety. I'm inviting you to start to do that. Like, wonder what would happen if you're in a conflict with your spouse and you go, oh, wait a minute, there is nothing at all dangerous right now. What would happen? What would happen if somebody swerves in front of you and you go, oh, that's already over. There's nothing dangerous right now. How's that going to change your life if you start perceiving safety more and more frequently? It's one of the ways of regulating the nervous system. And its fancy name is called neuroception. And nobody ever does the next one, which I'll be teaching this afternoon, until I can lead them to this place. This is the fulcrum of transformation right here. This piece of data that I just did with you. I do this with every trauma survivor. And the moment that they realize that just because they are afraid does not mean that they're in danger, everything changes. For those of you that do chaplaincy, this is absolutely one of the most important things that you can ever do to somebody who is in a lot of pain, that you're not in danger. Help them to get to the place of where they can perceive that they are perceiving a lot of threat, but there is nothing dangerous in this moment. Any comments or questions about that? So I want you to just look at these primarily two columns. We'll come on up to a microphone and self-regulate a little bit.
I'd like a little bit of clarification and refinement, maybe. I'm a psychotherapist, and for years I've been very aware about the difference between fear and danger. And the whole notion of helping people know, just because I'm afraid doesn't, it's telling me something, but it's not an accurate measure of my danger. And how important it is to help people understand that and understand what's going on. But the other side of that is sometimes I am in danger and I don't know it. And so in this moment, there may be no harm happening to me, but I do not know. I have been nearly killed in an automobile accident. I was in severe danger. I felt no fear because I didn't see it coming. So for me, I almost lose credibility if I say you are in no danger, as opposed to you can be well in the moment, whatever's going on, and have resources if a threat does come. So I don't think that's necessarily different than what you're talking about, but it would help me a little bit with that distinction, because I love what you're saying. In this current moment, there's no harm happening to me, and yet I cannot, in all good faith, tell you the person next to me, well, I cannot in all good faith tell you you're actually in no danger, but I can tell you you will be okay. Does that make
That's
any
right.
sense?
Thank you for that. That's very valuable. And I don't tell people that they're not in danger. You saw what I did with you guys, is I exhaust their pointing at things. I'll go through, as many things as they can come up with, and I want to kind of dissipate that it is, help them to see that it's not dangerous right now. It could be, it may be later on, but in this moment, I'll stay with that. Sometimes that's 30-minute, 40-minute process that I do with my clients of them just becoming exasperated with me because they can't find something dangerous in the room. But it makes all kinds of sense because you got an ACE score 7, it makes all kinds of sense that you would perceive everything in this room as dangerous, because you've probably had some painful past learning associated with many things in this room. Are you following me with that right now? That the more of those ALEs and ACEs that you have, the more you're going to perceive threat here in the present. And if you're perceiving threat all the time, then you are believing that the world is chronically a dangerous place and you're constantly in self-defense. So thank you for that. Yes. And here's what's cool about that is that as I help people to relax their bodies, then what happens is they get a frontal lobe back, so they can do that discernment more accurately about whether this is something that is requiring some evasive action to get out of, or is it something that is truly just perceived because of my history? Yes, ma'am.
How does this work for various cultural various groups? Because I think about myself as an African American, and what you're telling me is to disarm. And what I know is that I have to remain armed because I grew up in a society that taught me that.
And you survived every one of those experiences, and congratulations for making it all the way here, of surviving all of the systemic racism that you have survived. Sincerely, I mean that. I think I want to do this through the lens of law enforcement, because I've worked with them a lot. I have also worked with people of color a lot. My friend just wrote a beautiful book using my work called The Pain We Carry. I don't know if you've seen that book or not, but it's a gorgeous book, and she's using forward-facing in that to help it heal intergenerational trauma. But here's the thing, is that when we are perceiving threat, and we perceive it in our environment everywhere, our instinctual response to that is to step into hypervigilance. That we are constantly in a state of alertness as we are moving through our environment. Does that fit for you?
Repeat that again. I don't know if I heard you.
Say it one more time.
Would you repeat what you just said?
Sure will. That folks who are constantly perceiving that they're in threat, they adopt a body state of hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. And hypervigilance is never, ever useful. That sympathetic nervous system, which is the threat response system, it gives you 30 seconds of improved performance. You are stronger, faster, and smarter. When it activates, you get to be Superman or super person for about 30 seconds. But staying in that state for longer than 30 seconds is what happens is all those skills degrade while more and more symptoms emerge. So for as counterintuitive as it is, the people who are in real danger a lot need more than anybody to be in a regulated nervous system. So I teach folks that live in those environments, that work in those environments, to begin to adopt, to leave behind the instinctual response of hypervigilance and begin to adopt the intentional state of relaxed vigilance, so that you are stronger, faster, and smarter in those contexts of real danger, that you are actually performing better in those environments in a downregulated nervous system rather than an upregulated nervous system. Does any of that make sense to anybody in this room? Yep.
I'm sorry, the question was posed and I heard the apology, but I didn't hear the response. Could you just break it down a little bit for?
Say that one more time.
A question was posed about cultural.
About
and
what?
Culture.
Culture.
And how to engage. And I heard the offer of grace and the congratulations, but I didn't hear the answer to the question.
Well, that's
If
what it,
so-
that's what it was, is unpacking that folks that are in those contexts of where there is systemic judgment and danger for them, then their nervous system is going to respond to that in an instinctual way that is going to keep them jacked up as they are navigating through those environments. And that state of jacked upness is going to generate symptoms and does not yield you better protected in those environments. It yields symptom generation and less effectiveness in those environments to protect yourself. So I am inviting you to begin to develop the capacity to have relaxed vigilance in those environments where you are no longer suffering in those environments and that you are optimizing yourself in those environments. That's my hope for you. Yes, I'll hear your question or comment.
I think she was next.
Oh, sorry.
Isn't on? I'll just come up.
Well, come on up here. I was going to share mine with you.
So, relaxed vigilance in the presence of a continued systemic oppression and threat. I'm not exactly sure how to. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance happening when
I
I'm
get
trying
that.
to imagine what you're talking
I'm feeling
about.
that right now.
That if I may decide to relax and disarm myself for what helps to insulate me in an oppressive situation, I am now open to all of the different darts and arrows that perpetuate within this system. For what exactly? There's something missing.
They're not causing you harm when you are in.
Okay, how do you define harm? Maybe I'll start there.
That it is not producing deleterious effects in your nervous system or in the systems of your body.
Absolutely agree. Disagree with that, I'm sorry.
If you're in a relaxed body, you're not producing symptoms.
If I am in a relaxed body, then I am not producing symptoms.
Then you're not what?
Is that what you just said?
That if you're not producing symptoms, if all the muscles in your body is relaxed and you don't have a physical illness, then you are not generating symptoms. You're not generating distress.
Generating distress. In the presence of distressful things that are happening, I'm not certain if I'm expressing the disconnect that clearly enough for you to see what I mean. But if the system, if we're talking about systemic oppression, and if I choose to disarm, relax, that means I would have had to perceive the harm differently, or decide to say to myself that the way this structure is affecting me is not harmful. I'm not being harmed by this, and I'm not sure that I can make that leap if the harm is that I'm not able to advance, I'm not able to get the bonuses, I'm not able to, there's a lot of, and this is just systemic in the sense of where I work. We're not even talking about societal systems. So I'm not quite sure how maybe the way you're defining harm and distress match with the cultural context of the question that was asked?
Well, I yield and withdraw anything that has caused you any harm, and I apologize if it has. I'm not speaking about culture right now. I am speaking about what's happening physiologically in your body. And I think that that's underneath culture. So I would like to offer that there is a possibility to remain healthy in environments that are toxic.
And your suggestion is for me to tell myself,
Not tell yourself, no. It has nothing to do cognitively.
okay,
But to be able to find yourself and bring yourself back over and over throughout the day into a body that is not constricted. Then you are optimized for how you want to engage that environment to start to facilitate change.
and that's a huge ask. So you're suggesting that in order to get to that place, if my harm, as I perceive it, is a systemic thing, then I would need to maybe strategically debunk, is this causing me harm, is that causing me harm, and then allay my fears in that moment to arrive at a place of
Not your
calm.
fears, just your body. I'm still scared standing up here having this discussion with you, but I'm continuing to release the tension in my muscles so I can engage with you in a respectful way. And hold on to what I know to be true while still trying to engage you in a way that is respectful for you. Doing the best I can. I'm failing, I recognize that, but I'm still staying in the game and doing the best I can right now.
I would not say that you're failing to engage me because
I'm
I appreciate
doing
the
that myself.
conversation we're having.
But I don't want to try to push something on you, but I do want to invite you to take a look at a different way of being.
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sense to
That's all I'm asking
the
you to do.
context. Okay.
Thank you. Sincerely. Yes, to everybody. I got 5 more minutes, so I am happy to respond to questions, or we can finish this up. I'll leave that in your capable hands of if there's something important to bring forward, and we'll yield and we'll finish up some work this afternoon. So go
Okay.
forward.
Yeah, so I'm aware that my heart is pounding. And I want to thank you for this presentation, which has been full of a lot of richness. And I want to acknowledge that as a community, we are really working to make room for the diversity in our organization. And listening to you, even before the people who preceded me stepped to the microphone, I could hear that there was a disconnect between what I think you wanted to be offering us and how I was imagining that our people of color in our community in particular, and maybe others too, were feeling that the guidance you were giving us wasn't actually responding to the lives that we live. And I didn't want only people of color to be coming to the microphone because this involves all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something as well, kind of along those lines. When you were describing earlier the situation where someone is experiencing a threat, but maybe there is no threat, my concern is if you go around and say what you did with us in the room, the person and their fears are being dismissed. And I think that was some of what that's some of what I was hearing in real time. Some people were feeling some fear and then feeling dismissed.
And I hope that I made clear that even for me, with my own self-disclosure, that I'm still afraid standing up here. And I'm not one bit in danger, even while folks are, upset with me. There's nothing dangerous happening right now. So I want to continue to relax into being up here on stage and hearing dissension and still being able to be part of a discussion and talking this through. What I do know, and I've spent a whole lot of years with a whole lot of people in marginalized cultures, is as they get to able to regulate their nervous systems better, they have much better quality of lives in those cultures, in the environment of where they are being hurt.
Good morning. How are you
Good morning.
today? I come to say what I think I hear you are saying. I also have lived it out with some experiences with racial trauma. My cortisol levels got to the point that they were literally off the charts. So began to experience health issues. Went to my doctor, wanted to do working out. She said, the only thing you can do right now is yoga. Because the more you lift weights, the more you exercise, it is going to make your cortisol levels go extremely off the roof. The only thing you can do is yoga to relax the body. So to bring myself back into my body to help me relax. What I believe you are saying is that anytime we have a disruption, a traumatic disruption, one way to bring healing back is to get connected back, the brain back to the body to be able to be released. What I hear some of my brothers and sisters saying is, I can do the relaxation, I can see myself not in harm and danger, and yet you talk about complex PTSD. So as the systemic oppression, and I'm going to call it systemic evils, continue to happen, I can continue to do the breathing techniques, and yet if my environment does not begin to change, I can only continue to do so much breathing. I'm with you. If I can stay calm in my body, the ailments, the cancers, the kidney disease, I can keep that at bay. But what happens when the system does not change or shift? What happens when the system applies more pressure because homeostasis, I can change, but the system is not changing? What happens when that continues to put layers on top of layers on top of layers? I'm doing my breathing techniques in meetings. I'm doing my breathing techniques on lunch breaks. I'm doing my breathing techniques, so yes, it helps me in the moment, but what happens when the system never changes? So that's just my question. I get what you're saying. I have the question of what happens when the system, I'm doing my techniques, or I am seen as that's not really happening to you.
Thank you for that.
So that's the question that I have.
And I agree 100%, and you have an ally in me in that process. But here's the thing, that we all have to survive to be able to change that system. And what I want to do is to be able to give each of you quality of lives while you are surviving through that system and being able to establish and maintain some quality of life while you are moving through a system that has not yet evolved, and to continue to be a potent agent of change for that system. That's what I'm hoping to be able to do. And I love you all, and I am so flawed around this stuff that I yield and concede that I made hash of it.
Yeah.
But it's not from lack of love and not from my attempt to be part of the solution. Sincerely.
If I may, I would like to offer, you're right, you're not flawed. The theory is. And, and that's okay, And I just wanted to say, and because we do use this theory, as someone with a high A score of 8, what I would like to say is a lot of the things as far as imagination, EDMR, all those things are really great to help me center myself and be able to say what I'm about to say next. But as Anastasia, who just spoke, the environment, if that doesn't shift, then I'm overworking. And you leave it on the person who's already done the regulation work to continue to overwork. But here's the point that I just want to make. I just want to give an observation back to you. So someone came and asked the question, I think it was Rosalind, about systemic oppression in the cultural environment, and you paused and you started with law and government.
I started with what?
Law and government. You said, I want to bring this back to law and government. But what I want to bring...
Yeah, that was not a good choice.
Yeah, so it wasn't. So I think that is what higher awareness, when you're working with someone in from a marginalized identity, being aware of your language, your words, all of that just can re-trigger someone. So you're talking about, I don't think it has to be a label or PTSD. I think we just have to have great awareness that these theories, we're in a new time. And so some of these theories are not really helping us with the time that we're in. And I'm thinking about Gaza, I'm thinking about Israel, and I'm thinking about when you're in a constant state of trauma, how then do you be able to regulate yourself and go to an imaginative place? And I do think Afrofuturism brings us to, in order to live and regulate ourselves, we have to imagine new worlds. And I just want to invite everyone to imagine new theories in this time.
Well, here's my promise to you, is if you'll come back at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I promise you I will show you how you can regulate in those contexts. For those of you that want to learn how to do that, and let me make really clear, it is not breathing and it is not relaxation skills. It is something entirely different. So if you want to learn that capacity to be able to regulate your nervous system, you come back this afternoon and I promise you that I'll show you how to do it, and we'll have an opportunity to practice some of it also. So it's been a privilege to get to be here with you this morning. That's all I got.